So I want to switch our attention and conversation to why you're here, because you are the Conservative Parliamentary Candidate for Norwich South.
Yeah,
and we've had Clive Lewis on the podcast, and so it's quite a very competitive seat, I would say, isn't it? And Norwich South specifically has historically not been a very conservative.
Not since the 80s.
Not since the 80s. So. Yeah. What is your vision for Norwich South, and what do you hope to achieve if you were to be elected as a member of Parliament?
So I'm going to go right back, if I can.
Bring it.
So I was a head teacher in Norwich, right? I ran a secondary school in the centre of Norwich, and before that I trained as a teacher in London. And the Social Mobility Commission does this index of all places in the country broken down by second-tier local authorities. There's 324 of them. And I trained and taught and was a head of maths in Westminster, which was second out of 324 places in the country for social mobility. And I moved to Norwich to run Jane Austen because Norwich was 323rd out of 324 places in the country for social mobility. So perfect mirror image, right? Second top to second bottom. And the children of Norwich deserve better than being second bottom, because Norwich is a place with huge potential, right? Norwich is an incredible city. It's got incredible history, incredible culture. It's a wonderful place to live. There's huge talent coming in, right? You and all of your friends and people listening to this podcast, but it's true, right? There are tens of thousands of people descend on Norwich to come here and learn, and they bring incredible talent with them. That talent grows as they're here. And we have that as an incredible resource to be able to build upon. We've got some great industrial clusters, some great research going on. All of the building blocks and ingredients for an incredibly prosperous place are here, and yet that prosperity has not emerged, right? So that's why my kids were second from bottom in the country in terms of their social mobility prospects. Now, that has been getting better. Right, they were second from bottom because the educational outcomes in this city were not good enough. You know, your chance of passing your GCSEs if you're on free school meals, of going to a good or outstanding school if you're on free school meals, were really low. Your chance of going to a top third university were a third of the chance of going to top third university if you were growing up in Westminster, growing up in London. That stuff has shifted. Now, education in Norwich is much, much better. We've got some of the best schools in the country now. Sir Isaac Newton, the city centre, has been on sort of the Times top sixth forms in the country list, including all of the independent schools. You know, that we don't have lots of schools right at the bottom failing Ofsted anymore. Educational outcomes are much, much better. So we've made a real difference for the children growing up in this city. And we've made a difference in some of the other things. We've dualed the A11, we've created the infrastructure that you need, or some of the infrastructure that you need to start building that prosperity here. But we need to do more. Like, you can't turn around and look at every single one of those indicators that put Norwich second bottom, that moved me here, and say we've made the progress we need to. So we have on education, but real wages aren't where they should be. The relationship between wages and house prices definitely aren't where they should be. And everyone listening to this should be bothered about that. I'm sure you are. So there's much more that we need to do. Infrastructure to be able to create, the prosperous industry and business that we need isn't there. We've got 3/4 of a ring road, which is not a particularly useful proportion of a ring road to have. You can't drive out in multiple directions from Norwich. You can only go down. We've got the A11 dualed, but that's not enough. I went from London to Liverpool on the train the other day, and it took me the same amount of time as it would take me to go from London to Norwich. So there's still much more to be done. And I believe we can do it, and I believe we can end up with the sort of future that when I look at my kids that I was teaching, I wanted them to have. I believe that we can create that in Norwich. And I want to be a part of trying to make that happen. And so I think my job, and the job of anyone who spends some of their time in politics and throws their hat into a ring, is to set out a vision that you believe is going to make people's lives better, and to argue and debate for that vision in the hope of trying to make it happen.